Hey friends, it's Ryan. Thanks so much for joining me for today's daily devotional. Today I'm wearing my Mr. Rogers sweater. I love Mr. Rogers. He's one of my heroes. He's one of the people that I want to be when I grow up. He had a way of speaking the truth and love to people in a way that didn't shame them, but made them want to be better people. And he took children seriously as children. He didn't expect them to be like adults. He appreciated them for how they were made and who they are. One of the things that I love about Mr. Rogers is the quote that you've probably heard about looking for the helpers. When Fred Rogers was a kid, his mother would tell him a story. Anytime he saw something on the news that was difficult to understand, when he saw images from wars or poverty that were hard to watch, she would say, "Look for the helpers. You will always find people who are helping." And Fred Rogers would tell children this story not as a way of getting them to not look at the hardness of the world, but rather to reframe their focus, that even though the world is hard, there are people who are helping and you can look for them, which is a great way of helping children to understand the hardness of the world. Kids don't have the cognitive capability to really process what they see on the news sometimes. So reframing their focus instead of just lying to them or ignoring their fears, reframing their focus helps them to understand the world in a different way. But one of the problems that I have with this quote is the way that we use it as adults sometimes. We'll post it on Facebook or we'll send it in an email and we'll say, "Remember, Mr. Rogers said, look for the helpers," which is great. But I think that sometimes we use it as a way of letting ourselves off the hook. The world has a lot of big, deep problems. And when we just look for the helpers, we're saying it's not our job to be the ones fixing the world. We just need to make sure somebody else is doing it. One of the ways that I help reframe this for our parents and our volunteers is by using the story of creation, actually. God creates everything in the world, and then on the sixth day, God creates humanity, and God says, it's your job to take care of everything that's been created. In Genesis 2, the way the story goes, God creates Adam and gives Adam the task of taking care of everything in the garden. And then God sees that Adam is completely overwhelmed by this task, and God says, I need to make somebody to help Adam. And so God makes Eve. Sometimes in the biblical translations, we see it as God makes a helper suitable for Adam. Now, people over the years have used this in a bad way to put women subservient to men, to say God created men first, and then God created woman as a helper for man. And that is a gross misunderstanding of the biblical narrative. God doesn't create Eve as subservient to Adam. God creates Adam and Eve as co-equal. They are both given the task of taking care of creation. I think sometimes when we hear the word helper, we put it as subservient to leader. That there is somebody who is in charge, and then there is somebody who is doing the work of the people who are in charge. And naturally, we want to be the people who are in charge, and we want to leave the work of helping down here. But what we find in the biblical narrative, and what Fred Rogers would tell us if he were here today, is that it is our job to be the helpers. As adults, we have the capability of looking around at the world and recognizing what we can do about it. It's not our job to look for somebody else to be doing the hard work of putting the world back together. It's our job to be helping, to show kids, to show vulnerable communities that we are trying. Some of these problems are too big for us to fix in a day, in a week, in a generation, but that doesn't mean that we stop. We are given the task of taking care of everything that God created, including each other. So, my challenge for you today, friends, is how are you being a helper? How are you doing the hard work of looking at the difficulties in the world and actually doing something about them? Friends, I want our kids to be able to look for the helpers and see us.